Good morning, everyone. My name is Will Holman. I am a North Carolina licensed attorney, and I am also a senior manager on our legal advisory team at PERSUIT. I work with our customers on a one-to-one project-based basis, in addition to doing a little bit of thought leadership and keeping tabs on what kinds of things are happening out in the marketplace when it comes to outside counsel management and engagement. I am very honored and pleased to introduce our speaker and co-panelist today, Drew Ward from ExxonMobil, Senior Counsel. Drew, introduce yourself to the folks and let's get into it.
Thanks, Will. Thanks for having me. Thank you for everybody that has dialed in. My name's Drew Ward. I'm actually managing counsel now of legal operations at ExxonMobil. And in that role, for the purposes of today's webinar, I wear a lot of different hats, but outside counsel management is one of them. So um, that's me in a nutshell, and excited to talk to y'all today.
Well, Drew, I want to give our audience just a little hint or a little peek into your qualifications, especially when it comes to the Pursuit platform. ExxonMobil, you have been a Pursuit customer for about 2.5 years. You've overseen, as of this morning, 186 matters coming through the platform, 70 of which have included reverse auctions. And I know you guys have been on a journey in terms of using the platform and bringing it forward. You've gone from basically piloting it to this year seeing a global expansion of the program to both Canada, EMEA, and your APAC regions as well. So I think it's pretty fair to say you've seen a few things when it comes to RFPs and reverse auctions, and hopefully we can bring some of those to bear today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a really great journey with Pursuit. It's happened, I mean, when you say it all that like that, it's only been 2.5 years, and so we've moved pretty quickly with it. We've seen results. It's received well by both our legal management and our business stakeholders. So it's been a good relationship.
Well, I think that really sets us up well for kind of how we want to dive into this today. We put this in some of our marketing materials, but I think it's fair to say that this is probably the number one piece of feedback that we get when we approach law firms and honestly in-house counsel too, with the idea of running RFPs and then on top of that potentially running reverse auctions. And it's fair to say that it typically engenders a pretty strong reaction for folks who are not that familiar with the concept. And for that reason, it is perhaps reviled in concept, but also a little bit misunderstood. And so, what I'm hoping for us to do over the course of the hour is to number one, really kind of just talk into that, acknowledge some of that. But then number two, let's really dive into the data as well too, to try and break apart some of that perception from the reality of what's happening on the platform. And not only from talking about numbers and data, but Drew, really talking about your experience and what you're trying to get at too, when it comes to putting matters on the platform and putting them into a reverse auction. And so I want to take a minute and I want to really define when we say a good reverse auction process, what does that mean? And I think for clients, it really comes down to a number of things. Number one, running a fair and transparent process for your candidate firms. Number two, identifying an efficient market price for the services that are under consideration. It's got to reduce the amount of negotiation that would otherwise go in place instead of chasing a bunch of emails or perhaps looking across multiple different PDFs and trying to put the different pieces together. And then it's also really about stewardship of company dollars and company resources as well too. Let me just pause right there and Drew, turn it over to you. Is this a fair assessment of what good looks like in a RFP and reverse auction process on the platform?
Yeah, well, I'd say that nails it. That's exactly right. Especially the stewardship part. And I want to focus on that for just a little bit because I think it's important for I assume we have law firm participants on the webinar today. And one of the things that ExxonMobil looks for in a firm is a partner. They need to understand the pressures that we're under. We certainly understand or try and understand the pressures that they're under. And while a reverse auction process is maybe just sort of nascent in the legal industry, that is not how our business partners have grown up. When they source work, when our stakeholder, we have stakeholders that are not lawyers, they're business people. When they source their work, they are using reverse auction platforms, um, almost um, almost 100%. And so we need to be on board with them. We need to be arm in arm with the business lines that we support. And having a platform like Pursuit that enables this reverse auction process, it ingratiates us to our business clients. And additionally, we look for firms that are eager to compete for the work and understand the financial pressures that every in-house law department is under. So we'd like you to join us with that. The 3 points above stewardship, I mean, fair and transparent process is like this is your opportunity. If you thought like maybe we were leaning towards a firm um uh like at the outset, but and we didn't have a reverse auction process, like the reverse auction is the opportunity for you to really kind of sharpen your pencil, really think about the strategy. Where do we need to be 100%? Where is 80% good enough? And it gives you a sort of a second bite at the apple in the RFP process to really make your proposal strong. And then additionally, if you can tighten the price amongst three, four, five competitors, then I'm not making a decision based on price anymore. That's what I'd like to take price out of it so
Mm,
that I can establish that market price, and I'm picking the firm based on the firm that I think is going to do the best job.
yeah.
So all that is why we try and use reverse auctions as a default. It's not appropriate for every single matter that goes through, but we certainly try.
Yeah. I want to really pick up on that theme of stewardship and really kind of bringing the legal function forward to be on par with its other components or peers within the business, because I think that that's something that historically in the legal market hasn't really existed. The idea that the in-house function needs to really be a partner with the rest of the business in terms of how you go and outsource work and obtain services and ensure that you're using a discipline and a proven process to make sure that you're paying an appropriate market rate for those services. Is that fair to say that that's exactly what's happening when we talk about stewardship for you?
Yeah, that's you hit the nail on the head. I think there may be, I don't know how long ago, 20, 25 years ago, I recall stories of general counsels going into CEOs' offices and saying, "You tell me which cases you want me to stop defending, and I'll lower your budget. But otherwise, stay out of my business." Those days are gone. The
Mhm.
law department of any um, of any sophisticated law department is expected to, like, my general counsel's presentations to the CEO, we use the same deck as the profit centers of the company. Like, he doesn't get a different law deck. We're expected to show value. We're expected to show what we're doing to be efficient. We're expected to be making data-driven decisions. And so if we are it doesn't mean we don't choose an expensive firm. Like that's not what it means. It means that we have a reason. We
Mhm.
are able to articulate the reasons that we chose the particular firm, and that reason has to be better than I know this guy and he's great, or I know this person and they're great. Like it's got to be more than that.
Yeah. I think it's important to point out as well too that a good reverse auction process or a good auction also should have benefits for firms as well too. It shouldn't all be one-sided. I mean, Number one, in an ideal world, there is some pricing transparency, right? Where firms can understand where is the market price or where am I in regards to the rest of the market. Number two, it should give firms some real-time agility so that if they want to make a move, if they want to sharpen their pencils or come closer into market, they have the ability to do that. As you mentioned, that's their chance to really put their best foot forward and show how much they really want the work. And then number three, it should also give firms some competitive insight to understand what's kind of happening at the phase and activity level instead of the overall matter level. They can understand where competitors are realizing or showing efficiencies or gains that perhaps should also act as motivators for that particular firm to try and figure those pieces out of it as well too. Drew, does that sound like a fair assessment of what firms are getting when you talk to them on the other side of reverse auctions or RFPs?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a little reflection, right? And so the reverse auction process, like if you are just submitting an RFP and it goes to an in-house lawyer for them to evaluate, and then they make a decision, you don't you don't necessarily know if there's anything you could, if and you get to say you lose the work, like you don't know if there's anything you could have done
Mhm.
to 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 make your bid more competitive, or maybe you had assumed more work than there was a misalignment of expectations with the in-house attorney on a particular phase of the work. I mean, the reverse auction gives you an opportunity to see like, okay, you know, maybe I'm overthinking this particular phase and I'm too high, or maybe it's like I no, I priced this right. I know I've done this work before, and I'm good staying where I'm at on this phase.
Mhm.
That's fine. But it at least you have a little more clarity on where you sit with the other
Mhm.
firms.
And Drew, this we do have a lot of in-house on the webinar today as well too. And so let's kind of real world check this. Do firms ever come back to you and basically give you feedback on reverse auction and say, well, yeah, we learned some things for this, or yeah, this was really eye-opening for us in order to go through this process and kind of understand where our bid stood, at least in regards to market against other competitors. Do you ever get any kind of feedback from some of your more regular firms?
We do, and it's a mix. It's gonna be a mix of positive and negative feedback. Um, and sometimes the feedback is I just think this other firm was wrong, and and that's okay. We may agree with you and say, yeah, that probably is not a realistic number for that phase. And I'll be completely transparent. We discount firms that put unrealistic numbers in a particular phase of the case. And so yeah, we get feedback, and then other firms will say that, yeah, it was really nice to be able to see where I was at, as compared to the firms I was competing against. A lot of times, if there's a discrepancy, most of the questions we get are, whether peers were invited, was it, were you comparing me against firms in my same tier of the AmLaw 10, 20, 50, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, and like just in you'll have to take our word for it, but like our internal documentation will tell our attorneys like don't invite a firm that you're not genuinely expecting to compete for this work. So don't invite a firm if you don't think that they're going to put forth a competitive proposal.
Don't put a ringer in there just for the
Mhm.
sake of
Right,
trying to lower the price, basically.
right.
Well, let's throw this out to the audience for a moment. We actually have two different polls that we're going to invite our audience to participate in, and so you should see that on your screen now. We'll give everyone just a moment to vote, but When you hear the term reverse auction and legal sourcing, what's your first reaction? And again, we have a mix of both in-house and firms. Everyone who's attending is welcome to vote. And we'll take a quick look here to see what kind of results we get in just a second. Drew, you and I can't vote, unfortunately, but we'll see what kind of responses the audience is giving us here.
I'm partial to C, Will.
As I would expect, but we'll see what kind of cohort we have on the call here today. Let's see if we can advance and get some results back. Should be coming through. Here we go. Well, Drew, 177 votes, fantastic, and roughly half of those, 98, say it's a race to the bottom. It's all about price. Our choice is kind of down there in third because there's still a cohort of folks who think it's efficient, but it's a little bit too transactional. What do you think about that? What's your take on this overall vote?
Well, I think we'll show some numbers later that say it's not a race to the bottom, or that show that it's not a race to the bottom. The
Mhm.
lowest price does not win even the majority of the time.
Yeah.
And that's been our experience as well. So it,
Mhm.
it's it's not winning the majority of the time. I think the purpose is really, like I stated earlier, is you are attempting to take price out of the equation because you're developing a market price based on a
Mhm.
good, fulsome RFP. And then, there's like we think about budgets in for our matters. Not We don't even look at the hourly rates in Pursuit because there's some of the firms with the highest hourly rates end up being some of the most efficient. And so we've had that experience where like we got two firms, the hourly rates are wildly different, but the ultimate budget on the matter is very similar. And so then if I was making a decision on hourly rates, I never would have chosen this elite firm. But
Right.
because of the reverse auction and the well-structured RFP, that price is about the same between
Mhm.
two different firms. And so, like, I don't agree with the race to the bottom. I understand the efficient but transactional response.
Yeah.
To those respondents, I would say make it less transactional.
Mhm.
You have an opportunity between the time of submitting your original proposal and the RFP or excuse me, in the reverse auction to talk to us. Like you can get a you you're there's nothing at least in ExxonMobil's world where you're not allowed to say, hey, where do I sit before
Mhm.
this auction starts? Where do you think I have room to move? Like, did I miss an assumption, or am I is my take on this particular phase not matching your take on it? Like, there's opportunity. So I would say make it less transactional if that's the way you feel about it. I have had firms come back to me and say, I didn't know I was allowed to talk to you between the RFP submission and the reverse auction. And to my response was, well, why not? Like there's no rules
Mhm.
like it doesn't say that you can't talk to me. So like please reach out and see where you sit so you can be better prepared for the reverse auction when it starts.
Yeah. Well, let's talk into some of that data and specifically about that comment about it being a race to the bottom. We did pull our data here on Pursuit, and we do spend a lot of time looking at this. And what we can tell you is that across all auctions on the Pursuit platform for all time, the lowest bid only wins 46% of the time. Now, Drew, we looked at ExxonMobil's numbers as well too. You guys actually only choose the lowest bid 44% of the time. So you're right there within the average, but just a couple ticks below. But what I love about this is that if we parse the data just a little bit harder, 18% of the time, the highest bid wins. And so what that basically means is that 36% of the time, there's some other middle bid that's winning, which means that it's got to be some kind of non-price based factor that the in-house was using to make that selection process. Drew, did these numbers just shock you just based on your kind of real experience in running reverse auctions on the platform?
It doesn't. I mean, the reverse auctions are a tool in pursuit, but they are not invariably our in-house counsel will say the most valuable part of pursuit is getting a look at the firm's strategy prior to awarding the work. So that is the content of the proposal is by far the most determinative factor.
Mm,
Pricing, going back to stewardship, we have to make sure, like we have an obligation to our, you know, whatever corporate entity the in-house team represents, we have an obligation to be good stewards of that entity's assets. So the reverse auction, we have, like, it's something that we feel is one of those tools for stewardship. It helps to tighten the price, take the price out of it, but certainly, I'm not surprised that there are other factors because, like I said, I think the most determinative is the firm that's going to put forth the best strategy.
yeah. And I just want to pick up on that 18% where the highest bid wins, because I think you've talked a little bit about that, where if we're really taking price out of the equation, just because you're the highest bid, if as long as you're not, in outer space and you're within market, but you've got a winning strategy, or perhaps you've got the right mix of experience, or you've got some kind of insight that your competitors doesn't do not have, doesn't that really allow the selection then based on those factors, even if it just so happens to be the highest bid?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we want to pick the right firm for the work. That can be the highest bidding firm. That's
Mhm.
okay. Ultimately, we care about a successful outcome in the matter. Um, but it is, we are also able to say that highest bid came down a little bit. We can say, look, we got the best firm, or the appropriate firm for the matter,
Mhm.
and yeah, it was the highest, but we ran a competitive process. We can show our diligence and say like, yeah, this ended up being the best fit for this work.
Yeah. Well, let's talk into some of the other myths and misconceptions here before we dive into the platform and kind of talk about some of the mechanics. And really, again, we've already addressed the first one, right? That it's a race to the bottom. And so I don't want to spend any more time necessarily on that. But one of the other major pieces that we hear a lot from firms is that they think, well, the client already really knows who they're going to pick, right? Why am I investing time and resources and then having to staff a reverse auction if the client already comes into it with a leading horse who they're just looking to validate here? Is that your experience, Drew?
Well, client already knows who they'll pick versus leading horse are two different things, right? Like,
Okay.
so I we have had a number of RFPs where there was probably a firm that we had worked with in the past on similar work, and the attorney submitting the RFP had a, you know, a preconception that it's likely that firm A is going to win, but I've wanted to see what firm B or C could do, and I'll invite them to. Um, there have been numerous occasions where firm B or C put forth a great strategy. They ask really insightful questions throughout the proposal process, and we have picked other than the lead horse going into the both submission of the proposal and the reverse auction process. So I don't. I think there's probably some level of bias going into a lot of RFPs of like, yeah, I think my guess is that this firm might end up winning, but
Hmm.
that that quickly after the proposals come in and that quickly takes a backseat to substance of the response.
Yeah. Yeah. How about just knowing in advance who you're going to pick, and you're just running this because you got to go through the motions, or you've got governance rules in
Yeah,
place?
if any of my, so all of them come through me, like, I guess if people, I would say newer attorneys or attorneys that are or less familiar with pursuit, if they come to me with um, let's say, a, an attitude of I just have to run this because you're telling me to run it, then I will try and dissuade them of even using the, like,
Mhm.
if it really is like this is the only firm that can do this work, um, I'll question that, but if it turns out that it's really not a competition, then we
Mhm.
won't run it. We won't run it through Pursuit. There's plenty of matters at ExxonMobil that don't get run through Pursuit for one reason or another. So very much try and dissuade our in-house counsel from doing any kind of box checking exercise. So at least from our perspective, if you are invited to an RFP from ExxonMobil, you have an opportunity to win that work.
Awesome. Good to know. And I think that should be the approach that you take. It shouldn't be an exercise just for the sake of an exercise. I guess the third objection before we really kind of get into the platform, and we're getting some good questions about the mechanics of the reverse auctions that we'll be able to talk into in the platform. But a lot of times we hear from relationship partners at law firms that this really drives short-term thinking. In other words, is this really damaging the relationship that an in-house team can have with a firm that's built up over time, experience, learning ways of working, and such as that? What do you think on that, Drew?
So I said earlier that we want partners. We want our firms to be, and I don't mean the timekeeper classification partner, I mean a partner, partnership. And so to firms that believe that, I would say we view your leaning into pursuit, understanding that this is something that we have to do to show to for our reputation within our enterprise. The law department's reputation is very important to the law department.
Mhm.
And to be a good steward of assets and be sourcing our work competitively and diligently, those are all things that are quite important to our business stakeholders.
Mhm.
And so we are using Pursuit to not drive short-term thinking, but the firms that are leaning into it with us,
Mhm.
those are the firms that we're targeting for long-term partnerships. Not not short-term thinking, long-term thinking. So
Mhm.
I wholeheartedly disagree with that because if you have a firm that you've had a relationship with for, decades, perhaps. And as soon as you ask them to walk with you in a competitive process and they say, no, I don't want to do that, then you wonder in-house is like, well, you were you only my partner because I was not making you like validate your pricing to me? Because that's not a good friend, like
Mhm.
that's not a good partner if you're not willing to understand like what I have to go through as an in-house attorney. Like I kind of need you to be with me on this, and the firms that are with us on this, we're actually looking at them as for longer term relationships.
Mhm. Good answer. I like that. Well, let's advance now and kind of talk into the mechanics of the platform and get into the demo side. And so I think this is what a lot of our firms are looking forward to is a couple of views of what the client sees and is doing during a reverse auction. And then we're also going to take a look at the firm view and how those different things can change over the course of an auction as well too. So Drew, for our benefit of the webinar today, I am logged into our demo environment. So you may see some names or some references that look somewhat familiar, but they are very purposefully different. And everything that you see here has been de-identified, and all of the numbers are fictitious. But I have here a piece of commercial litigation, and this is the customer view of the platform. So Drew, this probably looks pretty familiar to you. When you come in, you can see all of your active matters, you can see your drafts, come back and look at what's been completed. But we try and make a pretty obvious status bar indication here when there is something happening that you should pay attention to. And of course, as you can see, we've got an auction in progress here for this particular matter. And we, again, have four different firms that have put four different bids forward for this piece of litigation. The auction is currently in progress right now, so we can go to the analytics tab. And Drew, this is a view that's very particular to the customer. The law firm, of course, doesn't see this view because number one, above all and else, an auction is anonymous. So a firm, number one, never sees the names of the other firms who are participating. That is something that is exclusive to you, the customer. But then I think what a lot of our customers appreciate or love about the reverse auction function is this timeline graph here, where they're able to take a look at how the firms are moving, who's making the moves, and then are we beginning to see a convergence on something closer to what we would call a true market price. Drew, hopefully this looks familiar to you. And I'm just curious about how you think about this auction graph and kind of what you're seeing here in terms of movement of an auction that's actually in progress right now.
Yeah, so this is what we like to see. All right, you've got I understand this is fictitious, but this is the idea. You've got four firms. You know, it's not unsurprising that the lowest firm is not moving. Although we have had circumstances where the lowest firm like will move up or down, sometimes based on getting some additional information from the person running it. But you've got these deltas on two higher firms and two maybe a little lower firms, but the deltas are converging, right? And so that's what that's what we're looking for. And, you know, from this point, we are what, within 300,000 of everybody's within 300,000 of each other.
Mhm.
That kind of delta for a matter that's going to theoretically cost close to 1.5 million, then you're getting to a point where strategy again is going to be the overriding factor of who ends up getting selected.
Right. So just by virtue of the fact that we're closing those deltas, once again, this is kind of reaching that point where you've mentioned taking pricing out of the selection decision. Now this lets you focus on some of those other qualitative factors such as strategy, right?
That's right.
The other thing I wanted to point out here, relatively new feature to the platform, is you also, as a customer, have the ability to see when a firm is actively logged on and monitoring or interacting with the reverse auction. And it's these little dots here. And a green dot indicates, as you can see with my mouse here, that they are currently watching the auction, whereas a gray dot means they are currently not logged on and currently not watching the auction. So if we know we have some customers who like to watch the auctions live as they're happening. And so this is a nice indicator for which of your firms are actively engaged with the reverse auction. But then again, this is always something that you have the ability to come back to as a customer. And this graph is always going to exist. So you can come back and still watch the moment by moment or minute by minute changes and just follow the graph lines here. In fact, you can mouse over them and get the detail points if you need to. Curious, Drew, are you a live auction watcher or have you seen enough and you can just watch the replay to get the gist of what happened?
So being honestly being overall the matters in pursuit, I don't I there probably are 3 or 4 going on at ExxonMobil right now. So like I'm not watching all of them, but if there's a particularly important matter, and the attorney is excited about it, we'll watch it together and see what's going on. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about how we get here. So this is obviously a matter that's in flight. The auction is in progress right now. I think it might be helpful if we take a look at a draft matter so that we can talk into, for both firms and customers, how this gets set up on the platform, and more importantly, strategically, how you're thinking about some of these things. So I'm just going to take the top matter that we've got here, which is a portfolio for corporate secretarial and entity management services. Draft mode, obviously this is where you're typing up your summary, putting together your pricing items, adding any qualitative questions that you would like to ask. But let's focus for today on the timeline section where you're setting up kind of the timeline for what's going to happen with this particular RFP. And Drew, you mentioned, I think first and foremost, that not every matter that comes through the platform is necessarily a candidate for an auction. And you obviously have the functionality first and foremost to turn that on or turn that off with just a click of a button. I'm wondering if you could maybe talk just real high level about what you're thinking about in terms of deciding whether or not a particular matter should go forward to an auction, or if this is one that we don't need a reverse auction for it.
So our default is that most matters are fine fits for a reverse auction. The factors that might dissuade us from that might be cultural. As you said earlier, we've rolled out to, you know, all over the world. So we take our cues culturally from those localities as to whether a reverse auction or whether the firms in that region might be ready for a reverse auction process. Um, Maybe if there's really only um, two possible firms and they both come in at a price like pretty equal price, we might not run the reverse auction because at that point we feel like we have a market price. So we
Mhm.
might cancel it in that circumstance. But in general, we don't, once we've decided to run something through Pursuit, like it, to me, it's hard to, there aren't a lot of circumstances where a reverse auction wouldn't be a fine idea, you know.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I think that's probably right, is there's always exceptions, and the particulars of the matter may make it such that a reverse auction isn't appropriate. But let's just assume, for the purposes of today, that this is a matter that fits for a reverse auction. Talk to me about that delta between proposal due date and auction start date. I've just thrown in exactly 24 hours. I'm curious, number one, for your experience or your thoughts on that delta of time between when proposals are due and when the auction would occur.
So we like to give 18 to 24 hours between proposals due and auction start.
Mhm.
Um, that is the window there is to provide the attorneys with the opportunity to review the proposals, see if any firm is misaligned.
Mhm.
Sometimes you get, a proposal in and either maybe the firm didn't follow instructions and only put in 2 phases because they think the, you know, the case is going to be dismissed at the motion to dismiss stage, and that's all I'm putting pricing for, and that skews the pricing for everybody else. So it allows a window for correction or to
Mhm.
remove that firm from the reverse auction, just not because you're not considering the firm anymore, but because you want it to be a fair process.
Yeah.
Um, and then, it also provides that window of opportunity, like I had alluded to before, where you can talk to the attorney before the reverse auction just to get a sense of where you sit, where there's might be misalignment, where you're an
Mhm.
outlier high or low on a particular phase, and just prepare for the reverse auction. So that's why we like to have a buffer of time. Sometimes the hiring has to take place on a short timeline, and we're not able to give as much time between submission and the reverse auction, but we do try and give 18 to 24 hours.
Well, Drew, one of the questions that we've received, and I think it's worth calling out here because you've mentioned this opportunity to ask questions. There's some concern that firms aren't allowed to communicate with you or off platform with the attorneys who are putting the RFP forward um, once the question and answer period during the bidding, or excuse me, during the proposal process is completed. What's your position on that? What's ExxonMobil's position on that? Maybe we talk a little bit into the messages function here on the platform and the ability of both you and the firms to communicate privately one-to-one through that message channel as well too.
So the most important thing to me in this entire process is to have aligned expectations with the firm at the outset of the work. So if there is an opportunity to get those expectations more aligned,
Mhm,
I don't see any issue with that.
mhm,
So we encourage the firms if there is a particular, like even from uh, from the time you receive the RFP, um, one, there's a balance, right? We expect the firms to read the RFP, and it's not a good look if the firm asks us a question about something that's been addressed pretty clearly in the RFP.
mhm,
But we do encourage your questions or suggestions about, um, you know, if you think we're off on an assumption and you can explain why you think that is, we
mhm,
we love that feedback. Um, but there's no like quiet period here between proposal submission and the reverse auction to get some additional insight about where you might have misaligned expectations.
yeah.
And you
And
can
you,
do that. I don't care we don't care whether you do that through the messages platform, your private channel directly to the attorney, or pick up the phone and call or email or whatever.
yeah. Uh, and you welcome questions during that interim period between proposal submission date and auction date. It sounds like you would welcome a firm saying, are we at least looking competitive here, or have we misunderstood something, or is there something that just looks really off on our particular proposal? You would welcome those questions.
We would, yeah, we would. And the more thoughtful a firm is, the better that firm looks to us.
Mm,
So we have had several firms win work honestly before proposals were um the proposal was good, but they were also asking like really thoughtful, intelligent questions before they even submitted their proposal. If you ask a question as a firm that prompts us to send a clarification to all the other firms, that's a good sign for you because you thought of something strategically that we had not thought of before.
mhm,
And so yeah, we welcome that back and forth throughout this process.
mhm. One of the other questions we've received, Drew, is on auction efficiency, specifically with regards to auction duration. And so that's the next setting that we can talk about on this page here. Customers have those five options to choose in terms of 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, or even longer. As you can see, we try and provide a little bit of guidance down here to attorneys who are directly engaging with the platform and trying to make that decision. Would be curious to hear from you your thought process on auction duration and the efficiency of the reverse auction process.
So we will default to 30 minutes or an hour. Um, we will try and select an auction time, and this is generally for US matters. We'll try and select an auction start time that is
Mhm.
convenient for Pacific and Eastern time zones and all time zones in between, so US time zones. The only time we would ever extend to 24 or 48 hours would be if we have a firm that we're inviting in Los Angeles and a firm in London to work on the same matter. We would try and be considerate of the time difference there, but in general, it's 30 minutes to an hour.
Right. And we should point out that is the start time for an auction. There, of course, is that 5 minute buffer period so that if another bid comes in within the final 5 minutes of the auction, there's an automatic 5 minute extension so that all of the firms have an equal opportunity to respond to that new bid if they want to, correct?
Yep. And we like that. I don't really see much benefit in waiting till the last 5 minutes. Honestly, it's not eBay, right? Like put forth your best bid, you know, whether
Mhm.
there's 5 or 10 or 15 minutes left.
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of brings us to this last setting right here, which is probably the spiciest setting. I'm going to show the options here, and then I want us to go into the slide and talk to them because this is another question that has been pretty spicy in the chat. But price ranking only, price rank and lowest bid, price ranking, and then each competitor's bid, and then a fourth option for phase race, or excuse me, phase pricing with only the lowest bid showing. I want to talk about the strategic considerations for each one of these because this is a very kind of spicy point with our law firms in terms of why are there times when I can only see my rank? Why are there times when I can't even see how many other competitors are in there? And why are there times then when I can see everything? And I suspect that if you're a firm, you probably want to see everything. But there may be strategic considerations from the in-house side for why you wouldn't want to do that. And so what I'd love to do is talk through those three main settings, because the fourth one is really kind of an extension of that last one on the right-hand side of this slide, Drew. But let's just kind of talk into each one of these. And I can talk from an auction theory or best practice theory why we see customers choose this, but I think it's really powerful to have you talk to it as well too. Let's just kind of start with where you're at, generally speaking. Do you have a preference in terms of visibility when it comes to auctions? And then we can talk into the other choices here.
So we usually default to price rank only. I'll say honestly, that is not a strong I don't have strong feelings on it, but
Mm.
that's where we tend to start. And then if we think it would be beneficial to the firms after receiving the proposals to alter from that for whatever reason, then we do.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's kind of just talk like rank only. If that is kind of your default or starting place. I mean, from an auction theory, the idea there is that it should reduce anchoring bias. So if that matter that we took a look at on the platform was around 1.5 million, we don't want to bias the competitors to think that somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.5 million is where everyone needs to come in at in order to try and be competitive. And so if you remove that visibility, you're really removing that anchor and you're basically saying to the firms, where can you go on price on this? I don't want to give you any kind of bias in trying to set that number. Does that kind of resonate with your rationale or thinking for that particular visibility setting?
Yeah, I think anybody who's negotiated a settlement can understand this one, right? Like I say 5 million, you say 10 million. We're anchored around talking about 7.5 million for to settle the matter, and it's, you know, what if that was never the right answer in the first place, right? Like so, yeah, I understand that theory.
Yeah. Now, when we start to give a little bit more visibility, like full visibility, rank and price, obviously at this point, from an auction theory, we're trying for maximum competitiveness, right? Like we want the firms to compete to see, hey, if you can come in, if you can do this work a couple $1,000s cheaper than the other guy here, this is going to make a difference for us on this particular matter. And so it's an idea that now that you can see how much you need to move in order to try and improve your position, can you get there? And so it's really kind of a next level mode where maybe the deltas are already relatively close together, but now you're looking because you're more price sensitive on that particular matter. Does that resonate with you when you think about turning on a different visibility setting?
Yeah, absolutely. And this particular one in the middle,
Hmm.
um, I find it to be really helpful where there is a firm that is quite competitive on a lot of the phases, and they have an outlier somewhere, where you're currently ranked 4 out of 5, but it's really just this one phase that's driving you up there. Like you could be down at 2 if you were more in line um, with the firms you're competing against. So we will increase that visibility as we tend to be sending a message like this you're these are the areas where you can improve.
Yeah. And then really drew this last setting here, rank and lowest price, and then its sibling, which is just lowest price without even understanding your rank. This is really where we're talking from an auction theory about trying to drive the most aggressive bidding practices farther. So rather than kind of sitting on your laurels and saying, well, we know we're 2 out of 5, or we're sitting right in the middle at 3 out of 5, we can take that visibility away too to say, no, we want your most aggressive bid on this matter. We don't want to give you any kind of reference points. We want you to focus on your price, and we simply want your most aggressive price. Now, I don't know that you've ever used that setting, Drew, but does that as an option make sense if you were a maximalist when it came to trying to encourage bidding activity, or absolute lowest price because that particular matter is just that price sensitive?
Yeah, no, I understand the theory. I think we would use this pretty rarely,
Mm,
um, because that's it's it's not it's not necessarily in line with what we're trying to do the majority of the time, but there may be a matter where it's like, look, I don't have the budget,
mhm.
or um and the consequence of the matter may not be as dire or as strategically important as other matters, and I really just kind of need the best price.
Yeah,
Like not every matter is created equally.
yeah. Well, I want to dive into that a little bit with the minutes that we have left here. And I really want to try and get into some of the data about price movement and what we see across the entire platform. And really want to talk about movement during the auction, and Drew, what that signals to you, because I think that this particular graph really tells a story here, and I would love your thoughts on if it matches up with what your thinking is as well too. I mean, what we can say is that if you start off first at the beginning of a reverse auction, your win chance is 44%. But if you're starting fourth and you remain at fourth, you're basically sitting yourself down there at a 12% win. But just making movement, even to come up to third or come up to second, has multiples effect in terms of increasing your odds of winning, all the way to the point of if you go from fourth to first, you increase your win chance percentage by 3.5%. What does movement during an auction signal to you, Drew? And does it necessarily make you more likely to pick a firm over another?
Um, it holistically it shows that the firm cares about winning the work, and is engaged and really thinking about their proposal. Um, reflecting on the proposal, thinking about how they can staff the matter more efficiently, where they could, where they may be over in terms of overthinking, like how much work a certain phase might be. So in general, what it shows to me is that the firm is active and thoughtful and trying to put their best foot forward.
Mhm. Well, let's talk about that a little bit more. Because of time, I'm going to skip this poll because I really want to talk into this data point as well too. And so this is a graph. We've never shared this data before. This is webinar exclusive today. But again, looking across all auctions on Pursuit, what we did is we tried to understand how the proposal win rate is affected by making price reductions during the auction. And what we see is a pretty clear reverse correlation across standard matter size. Now, I will say this correlation begins to break down when we get into higher priced matters. But if we just kind of take that average range, let's say just below $1 million or so, there's a pretty strong negative correlation here between movement during the auction and win rate. So again, if you make a 3 to 5% move, that's your highest correlation to win rate, 26% right there. But notice if you begin to get into that 8 to 10% price correction, you're actually dropping your percentage of win rate more than 7 points down to 19%. How do you think about that, Drew? How does that translate into the way that you're perceiving firm behavior during the auction?
So I want to be somewhat delicate here. So there's a lot of reasons why a firm might move 10% or greater, in an auction. And as long as there's a reason, then we don't view that movement negatively. Like I misunderstood one of the assumptions and we clarified it, we talked about it, and you know, that's what justified the move.
Mhm.
But if you're dropping 20, 30% in an auction and there's really no misalignment of what the expectations were, then it just kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth about like, okay, so you were going to be okay charging me 30% more, and there really wasn't a change in how you understood the matter. So what happened? Why'd you submit that bid in the first place?
Mhm.
So uh, I would say like, but we've had plenty of times where like it really is it's better to just have a conversation about like what was the initial thinking? How did that thinking change? And okay, if it necessitates a larger price drop based again on aligning those expectations, then we're not going to view that negatively. It's just when there's like all other things being equal, before the reverse auction, you were going to charge me X, and after the reverse auction, you're happy to take half of X, like then it becomes a little questionable about like what what was the what was the thinking initially.
Yeah. And so I think that this slide really kind of speaks to what you're getting at, that you're looking for firms that have confidence that they've understood their proposal, they've come to you with a tight, well, thought through proposal. And so some late drops when it comes down to it in order to try and show that they're wanting to be a partner really kind of shows you that they're thinking well and thinking strategically about it, as opposed to maybe coming in and making just huge drops very early on once they see how far out of market maybe they are. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to say it.
Well, I think just to kind of wrap things up, because we are at the top of the hour here, we're really talking about transparency, not pressure to make movements, configuration, being smart bidding. It's a mutual advantage for both sides. And then both sides being able to adapt to the data, firms being encouraged to try and outperform wherever possible. Um, I do want to say that for firms, obviously, leveraging auctions for competitive intelligence and learning, kind of key takeaway for clients. Again, like you've talked about, Drew, proving fairness, driving consistency in market pricing, that defensibility to be a good stewardship of company funds, It's really about going from negotiation, I think, more towards an optimization in terms of getting proposals from firms and getting that alignment. And so, Drew, again, we're at the top of the hour here, but I do want to just thank everybody on behalf of both of us for joining and being a part of our presentation today. If you are a firm, we have a new community that you can join via this QR code. We'll also put the link in the chat as well too. But this is a place where if you are a law firm, you can absolutely come in and join our community. You can make product requests, understand new product features. It's a great opportunity to interact directly with our firm's team here at Pursuit. Meanwhile, if you're an in-house team and you perhaps like to look into the model a little bit better or have a walkthrough of it, we've got a QR code for you as well too. And so with that said, Drew, what an honor, what a pleasure to be able to speak with you and get some insight. I know both our in-house customers and our firms really appreciate the opportunity to even just have this little bit of insight into some of the thinking and some of the considerations. So on behalf of all of us, thank you again for your time. It's been a wonderful hour with you.
Thanks, Will. I appreciate you inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for everyone, please use the chat, use these QR codes to reach out. And with that, we will conclude the hour. Thank you all so much for attending. We'll be back soon with another in this series.